You ever trust someone so completely that when they stab you in the back, it changes something inside you? Back in the 90s, before the internet ruled everything, friendship was built on shared secrets, mixtapes, and, for us, video games. But one betrayal, one greedy, smirking classmate, taught me how far anger can push a person. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about guilt, pride, and a letter that destroyed someone's world. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who smiled to your face and stole behind your back, hit that like button, because this story will remind you. Sometimes, karma doesn't wait for adulthood to show up. The year everything changed. I still remember the sound of those floppy disks clicking into the drive. That metallic clack, followed by the grinding hum of the old PC. It was the heartbeat of my teenage years. It was 1994, maybe 95, and computers were still magic boxes only a few of us understood. If you had a PC in your bedroom back then, you weren't just a kid, you were the kid. The one people came to when they wanted a new game, a copy of something rare, a taste of that digital gold. Me and my best friend, Daniel, we were inseparable. Two awkward nerds in a small European town, saving up every spare coin to order games from abroad. Real boxed copies, wrapped in crinkly plastic, smelling faintly of cardboard and printer ink. They were expensive, painfully so, but we didn't care. When a new game arrived, we treated it like treasure. We'd copy the disc protection, trade them, and build our little empire of digital joy. There was trust there, the kind that only exists between kids who have no reason to doubt each other yet. The new kid. Then he showed up. A new kid in our class. I'll call him Eric. He had this effortless confidence, the kind of grin that said he'd been liked his whole life. Word spread fast. His uncle had a huge game collection. Stuff we could only dream of. Doom 2, Monkey Island, The Settlers. All of them. For two broke teenagers like us, it felt like Christmas. I still remember the first time we talked. He leaned over my desk, flashing that smug grin. I heard you've got some games. Maybe we can trade. Daniel looked at me, eyes wide. Finally, someone else in town who got it. We didn't hesitate. We trusted him. We gave him our originals, pristine, our pride and joy, and waited for his copies. The betrayal. The first trade came back with problems. Corrupted floppies, scratched disks, files that wouldn't even boot. We figured, okay, maybe his uncle's computer just messed up. But it happened again, and again. Each time, he got one of our working originals. Each time, we got garbage. Weeks turned to months, and the pattern became obvious. We were getting played. Daniel wanted to confront him, but I wasn't ready. I kept hoping it was an accident. That's the cruel part about betrayal. You don't see it until it's too late. One afternoon, I stopped by Eric's house. His dad wasn't home, but through the living room window I saw it. A stack of our games on his shelf. Our names, our handwriting on the discs. He hadn't even bothered to remove them. Felt like a punch in the chest. My hands went cold. My throat tightened. And when he finally saw me looking, he just smirked. What? You gave them to me. I didn't promise anything back. The way he said it, that casual arrogance, it burned into me. It wasn't just theft. It was mockery, humiliation. After that, it got worse. He started teasing me in front of others. I was the kid who got scammed. He'd joke about how much I loved Freddie Mercury because I wore a Queen t-shirt once. You know he died of AIDS, right? He'd sneer. Guess you like that kind of guy, huh? I laughed it off at first, but inside, it stung. He knew how to twist the knife, mocking something I actually admired. I was a quiet kid. He was loud, confident, and cruel in that way only teenagers can be. Teachers didn't notice. Friends didn't care. It was just me and Daniel sitting in the back of class watching this guy walk all over us, and somehow everyone still liked him. By then, it wasn't just about the games. It was about dignity, the spark. Then one day, our class was told we'd be attending an event, something about AIDS awareness. The early 90s were full of those campaigns. Red ribbons, posters of Freddie Mercury, warnings about safe sex. Eric rolled his eyes the whole time. I remember him whispering to someone, "Bet this is Mina's favorite topic," mocking me again for liking Queen. But that's the thing about anger, it builds quietly until one day, the right idea ignites it. Because at that event, we were handed flyers, pamphlets, and free condoms with the Foundation's logo on them. Daniel turned to me, eyes glinting. We both thought the same thing. That smirk of Eric's, his self-righteous family, his homophobic jokes. We knew exactly how to hit where it would hurt most. Pause beat. And that's when we came up with the letter dot. We didn't plan it like a movie. There was no whiteboard, no slow-motion montage. It was a whispered consensus between two kids who had been pushed too far and who knew, in the small logic of teenagers, exactly where the other person's soft spot lived. We had a printer, one of those early inkjets that coughed and smeared if you pressed it too hard. I'd spent my allowance building a tiny desktop shrine in my bedroom. A computer with a monitor that warmed my face like a stove, and an optimism that came from being able to play a new game at midnight. Daniel was the one with the handwriting that looked official. He'd practiced signing fake permission slips for Jim a dozen times and made them believable. We sat at my desk for hours, the room lit by a single desk lamp, the hum of the PC like something mechanical and alive. We scoured the pamphlets and flyers from the AIDS event until we knew the imagery by heart, the logo, the font, the slightly earnest phrasing the speaker had used. We scanned a leaflet to our printer and, pixel by pixel, recreated the Foundation's letterhead until it looked real enough to fool anyone who glanced. We rehearsed the wording until it sounded like an organization you could trust. Not cruel, not mean, clinical, compassionate. The kind of tone that would embarrass someone without ever sounding accusatory. Dear, first name, Daniel typed, and then he stopped, fingers hovering like a pianist unsure where the melody had gone. He looked at me, and the familiar, dangerous gleam was back. We can't just say it, he said. We have to make it supportive, confusing, make them believe it's from someone who wants to help. So we made it supportive. We wrote lines that sounded like they came from a counselor. We understand it can be difficult to be open about your sexuality. We included the pamphlets we'd collected, folded them again and again like contraband. And finally, because the event had given out those little branded condoms, cheap, bright wrappers with the Foundation's logo plastered on them, we tucked a few inside an envelope the way you tuck a real hope into a real apology. We didn't plan for pain or for tears. We planned for humiliation, for social fracture, for irony, for his parents to open that envelope and, in their confusion and anger, draw conclusions we hoped would sting him where he had hurt us. I felt the cold measure of what we were doing. In my chest there was a war between two kids. One who wanted his stuff back so badly he'd dream about it, and another who, even at 14, knew that this was a dangerous game. But anger had a sound, and in the small room it drowned out everything else. We wrote the letter, printed it on slightly glossy paper, slipped in the pamphlets, sealed the envelope, and addressed it not to Eric, but to Mr. Last Name. His father. We were small-time tactical about it. Send it to the house so his dad would be the one to see it first. We mailed it from a street corner a few blocks away, hands shaking with the delicious, nauseous cocktail of adrenaline and guilt. Mailboxes are humble. A little metal maw that swallows letters and keeps secrets for weeks. Ours had the smell of rain and dog-eared bills. The envelope went in, and for a few days nothing happened. I tried to sleep. I tried to concentrate on schoolwork. I lied to my parents about late homework and told them I'd been up practicing for a school project. Every time the school bell rang, I flinched. I knew it was childish. I knew it was cruel, and still I waited. Then one afternoon Daniel called, voice clipped. It worked, he said. It worked better than we thought. I wanted to ask what he meant. The phone felt like a live coal against my ear. I didn't need to ask. I could hear the tremor in his laugh, the tremor that meant two things at once. Triumph and an uneasy, new terror that maybe we'd gone too far. The first thing I heard about it was a rumor with speed and teeth. In the schoolyard, whispers moved like a flock of birds. Someone mentioned that Eric's mother had been crying that morning. Someone else said his father had come to the school looking for him. Another voice said he'd been grounded. No one knew exactly what had happened, but the image was vivid. Eric, surrounded by adults, stripped of the social armor he'd used to cut others. I remember the way that rumor felt in my stomach. Hot, immediate, as if the world had been rearranged and we were responsible for the earthquake. When I saw Eric in the hallway the next day, he looked small. He walked with his head down, something I'd never seen. The arrogance was gone, replaced by confusion and an unfamiliar vulnerability. That vulnerability made me feel sick with both triumph and something else I didn't have the language for. A prickling, shame-shaped pressure that lived along my spine. Later that week, the principal called us into his office. It's funny how authority concentrates in small rooms. The walls were beige. The principal's tie had a pattern that looked like it was trying too hard to be serious. Eric's parents were there. His mother steadying herself with hands that trembled slightly. His father red-faced and silent like an animal caught. "You two are responsible," the principal said finally, looking at me and Daniel as if he could weigh our souls in the light of his fluorescent lamp. "Explain." We told the truth. We admitted it. The deed was too small and too obvious to confess to anything else. Daniel's voice didn't shake. Mine did. I could feel my lips moving and my chest tightening as I said the words that would live in my memory like a permanent recording. "We made the letter. We thought it would teach him a lesson." Mr. Last Name didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it wasn't anger that he showed first. It was the exhausted, brittle sadness of someone who feels betrayed by a child in their own family. "You had no right," he said. "No right to decide what is and isn't true about him." That stung in a way the games never had. It wasn't the loss of property or the mockery or even the humiliation. It was the way our prank had rewritten a family's story, even if only for a while. We were punished with the standard rights. Detention, apologies read into a recorder that made my voice sound too small, and a talk with the school counselor about responsible behavior. The principal made us write an apology to Eric's family and to the AIDS Foundation for impersonating them. We did. Our handwriting looked different on his family's paper. It looked like the handwriting of people who had been in a dark room and had seen a new, dangerous light. At home, in the quiet of my room, the victory tasted different than I remembered. There was a moment of cinematic clarity I hadn't predicted. A hollow, echoing space where the rage had been. The games didn't come back to me. We didn't recover what we'd lost. Eric had to endure a humiliation that he didn't deserve, even if it awakened a measure of comeuppance that felt, at the time, satisfying. People around us reacted in ways I hadn't expected. Some classmates whispered that we'd gone too far. Others, who had also been treated poorly by Eric, gave us the sly nod of comrades in arms. Daniel seemed different. He refused to joke about it anymore. When we met in the park later that month, he sat across from me and said, quietly, "Do you ever think about how this will look in 10 years?" I didn't know how to answer. I thought about the games on his shelf, the way his father had looked at him, the look that can only come from someone who suddenly realizes they've assumed something about their child. The principal's words, "You had no right to decide what is and isn't true about him," had landed like a stone in my chest and made ripples. For a while, we were kings of a small, terrible kingdom. People who had laughed at our frustration now laughed with us. But the laughter felt brittle. It echoed off of classroom walls and didn't fill the empty place inside of me. Eric didn't forgive us immediately. He came to school the next day with a quiet that smelled like coals. He caught my eye in the library and walked over, each step measured. "You think you're better than me?" he asked, not loud but precise. There was no bravado left, only something like rawness. His voice had a new texture, paper rubbed thin. "I thought you took advantage of us," I said. "You gave us broken things." It was the most honest thing I could manage in that moment. "You think your letter taught me a lesson?" He laughed then, and it was not the cruel laugh I'd seen before. It was a laugh full of small, sharp things. "It taught my parents to panic. It taught them to look at me differently. You took my life and put it under a microscope." Hearing it like that, hearing someone spell out the damage in syllables measured like bullets, it felt different. I swallowed. "I'm sorry," I said. And it was the first time the words came without the buffer of humor or cleverness. "I'm sorry I helped do that." For the first time since this all began, I saw the exact shape of what we had done. It wasn't just that we humiliated him. We had weaponized people's fears, turned their love into a punishment, and given them a panic that had nothing to do with who Eric was. He looked at me as if deciding whether to accept the apology or keep the wound raw. In the end, he didn't accept it. He turned and walked away. I wanted to reach out and stop him. I didn't. Watching him walk away, I felt an almost physical recoil, like a piece of me had been cut loose and lodged somewhere cold and quiet. Months passed. The games weren't returned. We drifted into different classes and different interests. Daniel and I stopped trading as much. The trust that had once been currency between us had been spent. Years later, much later, I thought about how the story had stuck to all of us like a stain. I would catch Eric in the periphery of my memory. A boy who'd been cruel because he could, and a family who had been shaken by a single letter. What surprised me most was how the memory made me feel when I was older. One afternoon in my 20s, I was walking past a shop window and saw a young man wearing a faded Queen t-shirt. A rush of something, recognition, shame, regret, hit me, and suddenly I remembered the exact texture of Daniel's handwriting on that forged letter. I'd matured enough by then to know the ways that people weaponize shame and to understand how dangerous it is when you start deciding for others what their truth is. The teenage logic that had justified the prank, he deserved it, felt shallow and brittle in the light of adulthood. I could still justify it in 4 different ways. For the theft, for the arrogance, for the mockery. But those justifications didn't erase the fact that we had stepped into someone else's life and set off an alarm. I talked to Daniel a few times in those years. Once, over beers, he said, "Do you ever think about his parents? The way they must have felt? I still can't get that out of my head." "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes I wonder if we made him worse." Those were the nights when guilt visited like a patient, uninvited friend. It sat in the corner, stared at me, and reminded me that revenge often comes packaged with a bill you don't notice when you sign. I kept asking myself how to hold 2 truths at once. That Eric had wronged us in a way that felt personal and violating, and that our response, the fake letter, dragged innocent people into a panic. There's a difference between justice and cruelty, and sometimes the line between the two is so thin the light of it blinds you. Revenge had felt righteous in the moment. It had felt like a cleanse. But the wash left stains. I don't tell this story to excuse what he did. Stealing, whatever the medium, was hurtful. Our games were our pride. They were our private universes. What he did was theft and cowardice and a mockery of the small economies kids build when there's no market. But I also don't tell the story to celebrate our giving someone a taste of their own medicine. I tell it because I think it reveals something about how young people learn cruelty and also learn to wield it. We thought we were righting a wrong, but we were also experimenting with influence, with the terrifying ability to change what others believed about someone. There's a moral I don't want anyone to miss. Punishment that damages the innocent cannot be justified by the wrongs of the guilty. If you decide to punish, make sure you're not punishing the people who love them. And if you feel justified by a hurt, remember that hurt is a poor architect of long-term decisions. People ask me now if I felt triumphant when the letter worked. The answer is complicated. In the immediate aftermath, there was a jolt of triumph that was hard and bright. It sat in the center of me like a small, sharp jewel. But that jewel had teeth. Pricked. It bled when I held it too long. The real payoff, strangely, was not his humiliation. The real payoff was learning, painfully, about the currency of consequence. I learned that actions ripple. I learned that the thrill of a quick victory can be followed by long ripples you don't control. I also learned something softer. Empathy is not the same as weakness. Empathy didn't come easily to me then. It came slowly, years later, the way frost melts and reveals the ground you buried under it. Now, when I hear about someone being mocked in school or shamed online, that memory, the one where a 14-year-old me helped manufacture panic, presses against my ribs and keeps me from laughing. I don't know if Eric ever forgave us. I don't know whether he carries that day like a scar or like a lesson. People change. People carry their wounds in different ways. Sometimes the person you hurt becomes someone who knows better because of what happened. Sometimes they become someone you never see again. If there is redemption to be found in this story, it isn't ours to claim. It's a quieter thing. The slow, stubborn work of looking back and feeling dread at what you did, and then trying not to repeat it. If revenge teaches you anything worthwhile, it's this: the moment that feels like victory can be the start of a long, private penalty. If you ever find yourself wanting to punish someone, ask who else will be hurt besides them. Ask if your anger is a compass or a weapon. There's a difference. This is one of those stories I tell begrudgingly, because there's a lesson sewn into the ugly fabric of it. Revenge can feel satisfying for a night, but it changes you in ways you don't notice until much later. If the story hit a nerve, if it made you feel the cold thrill and the warm regret at the same time, hit that like button and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, have you ever taken revenge and later regretted it? Or did it feel like a righting of a wrong? Share your story. I read every comment. And if you liked this deep dive, there are more stories coming that look at the dark sides of justice and the messy human hearts behind them. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.